let's cut to the chase. If you want the too long didn't read you, a frequency event happened in Spain. The frequency protection kicked in, took out massive parts of the grid. The whole country went in blackout. Some of it stopped on. It's probably down to some sort of generation, whether that be solar or whatever, tripping out, cascade effects, knocked the whole lot out, caused loads of shit, sent it back to the dark ages. The very fact they didn't have a full blackout, like the news keeps saying, meant some energy was still on, which meant they could re-energise the rest of the grid. I also talk about in this video frequency events, blackouts, black starts, and how people react to having no electricity. But if you want to fuck off now and they've just given a view, then off you go, fella. See you later. But if you want to learn something, hang around for me rambling on for 31 minutes 15 seconds.
La electricidad está cortada, puta madre.
People message me, are you going to do a video on the Spanish grid thing? Yes, I am. I've got a job. I'm doing that first. That blackout thing is going to happen in this country, as I've been saying for a while. And when it does, it's going to take over the whole or parts of the country back to the dark ages. Your traffic lights won't work. You won't be able to buy petrol. Your boiler won't work. You fucking won't be able to spend any money on your card. It is going to happen. But no one seems to want to talk about it. The news want to talk about it in a funny way, but Ed Miliband's got his head buried in the sand. Do I have an idea why it happened? Yes, I do. Hola, welcome to this Spanish power station I've come to, just on the Costa del East Midlands, just outside El Nottingham and El Newark, and it's called El Staithorpe Power Station. And I've come here to talk about the problem with the Spanish national grid they're having at the minute.
Apagones, sucio cerdo inglés.
So if you're new to this channel, yeah, welcome. This is actual electrical content with me, Jamie Blackout, or as I would say if I was Spanish.
Es contenido eléctrico real. Versión en español bienvenida.
I'm going to talk about a Spanish national grid going off and what's true and what's not and what's going off. But I'm going to take this fucking stupid out first, because if you're studying with the camera, you look reasonably normal, but if you're studying with this out, you look like a right twat. So the Spanish national grid, some people are referring to it as a blackout, some people are referring to it as blackouts, some people are referring to it as a black start. So Spain and Portugal have lost a considerable amount of their power grid. It's just gone off, yeah? And the question is that a fault? Is it a cyber attack? Is it whatever it is, yeah? And a lot of people are messing around now. I don't think it is a cyber attack, because if it was a cyber attack, there'd probably be a total blackout. In fact, I'd argue that the only way to take out a whole national grid is via a cyber attack nowadays. Back in the early days of the grid, like when this was built, Staithorpe, which is actually the home of the first part of a national grid that connected from here to somewhere else. That's why I've come here. Do you get it? In the early time of the grid, when all the protection equipment was like electromechanical and set with dials and stuff, it probably would have been easier to take out the whole national grid. The thing is, nowadays, a lot of the protection equipment is more advanced, it's electronic, it's more sensitive, it's networked, and it can work nationally. So it's actually much, much harder nowadays to knock out the entire national grid and put it into the dark than you would think, because it's designed to split into segments if anything goes wrong. Much like your fuse board at home, it's divided into sections. I'm not going to get technical because I'm loose on facts on this channel, because I don't fucking know what they exactly are. Don't work for National Grid, but generally, like all electrical protection schemes, it's divided into segments. So in your house, if your upstairs sockets go off, it's hard and likely your downstairs sockets will go off, and that's how they do it with a grid. So at the minute, I'm assuming, unless something's changed in the last 10 seconds, yeah, the whole national grid is working as one. All these pylons that you can see behind me, this switchyard, are in harmonic fucking matrimony at 50 hertz and whatever 1,000 volts this is with every other bit of the national grid. It's all chugging along merrily and there are no problems. However, if for example this section of the national grid developed a problem and the frequencies started going doolally, it can segregate itself from the rest of the national grid to not drag the rest of it down. I don't know what you're thinking, what the fuck's all this got to do with Spain? Well, that's what it has got to do with Spain. This is what I believe happened in Espanol, and this is the problem that every national grid faces, no matter how it's built or managed. This is what the national grid control room deal with on a regular basis, this kind of thing that's happened in Spain. However, I think the thing that's happened in Spain has happened a little bit too quick, and some people have been caught literally with their pants down. In this video, I'm going to talk about three things now. First of all, I'm going to tell you what I think happened in Spain and why it happened and how we protect against it and why it goes into that kind of thing. I'm going to talk about black starts and I'm going to talk about blackouts. Right, what I think happened in Spain was, I think it was a frequency event. I think the frequency dropped so rapidly that there was a problem. And that frequency dropped so rapidly because of either some problem going off, but maybe it was because suddenly there wasn't enough supply to meet the demand. When supply doesn't meet the demand, the frequency starts to drop. And this is a cascading thing that I'm going to go into in a bit of detail in a second, where things end up getting really bad really quickly. I haven't looked at all the facts. I'm not start putting graphs up because it's not my fucking style. I don't give a shit. But what I did read was something like 30 gigawatt of load just suddenly disappeared off the grid. There'll be a graph here, right, that I'll get.
I'm not start putting graphs up because it's not my fucking style. I don't give a shit.
So that was a fucking lie.
But suddenly, at a certain point in time, which is fucking irrelevant to me, a massive load of load fell off the grid at once. And you have to ask yourself, how does that much load suddenly just fall off the national grid? Did everybody turn the kettles off or something? Did Artisan do a solar install on someone's fucking tennis court in España? I don't know, but I'm going to tell you, there's no doubt about it, a massive load of load did disappear off the national grid. That is the national grid Español, yeah? That is a fact. However, not in the way we might consider it. It wasn't everybody switching their lights at the same time. What happened was a huge proportion of substations that probably look something like this suddenly decided they did not want to deliver clean green energy from all that lovely solar or wherever it comes from to the houses and businesses of Spain. A load of substations that look like this cut themselves off. So why would a massive protected substation with what looks like double buzz bars, i.e. fail-safe supplies, just turn itself off from the grid and stop supplying electricity? The answer to that is frequency and frequency protection and stopping the frequency dropping, because when frequency starts to drop, it keeps dropping and dropping and dropping and dropping until it reaches zero, and then you've got fuck all. And I'll give you a clue, 10% of fuck all is fuck all, 1% of fuck all is fuck all, and 100% of fuck all is fuck all. And you do not want on your grid fuck all, because when you've got fuck all, no one's got nothing. And believe me, people start getting fucking angry. So what we need to do is, when the frequency starts to drop because of lack of supply to meet demand, you either have to suddenly create loads more supply by turning on things like batteries, fast reaction generators, peak engines, stuff like that, or you have to start losing your load, because if you can't meet the demand with a supply, the frequency starts to drop. And at first it starts to drop slowly, very, very slowly, then it starts to drop rapidly. This cascading effect eventually results in the frequency getting to zero, and then you've got fuck all, as previously said. But why did the national grid of Spain trip off like it did? I will show you at this substation I've come to for that purpose. Now, if I pan across in probably the craziest outdoor shot I've ever done, you'll see some lines here that go to a pond that's just over there. And then as I slowly pan round on this panoramic view, you'll see there's those pylons that are coming in. Next to them there's another set of pylons. Then there's another set of they're called towers, aren't they, really? Anyway, there's loads of towers coming into here because this is a national grid substation. I think 275 and 100 and something kV, whatever flavour they like to use. If you keep coming around, look, there's just loads of pylons coming in here. And they all come in here as different circuits from different sources. So even though they're quite close together here, the further they get over there, they spread out and go to all sorts of different directions. If I can be bothered, I'll put in an open infrastructure map just here and we'll have a quick look at where they go. Right, we're on open infrastructure map. We'll scroll into the United Kingdom. Yeah, you can see there, look, you see that little bit there where all the cables coming out? I bet you that's Staythorpe. Bet you that's Staythorpe. It is, look, there you go, look, because you can see it's the original point of the grid because it's all scrolling out from there. So if I zoom in down to round about here and let it load, that's Cotton. There's Newark, look. So there's where I was, Newark-on-Trent, Staythorpe Power Station. You can see the lines coming out. So to the bottom right, look, you've got an orange cable there that goes all the way to Bicker and over to Skegness. You've got a line there, ZA, going right down the country. You've got ZD coming out there, going right to the left-hand side. You've got ZDA jumping up to High Marham. And you've got a few other lines coming out. I'll zoom in a bit more. Look. So basically, you can see there the spread of everything coming out at all different angles, going all over the place at 400 kVA and 132 kVA. Not much going to the right, though. I think that's covered by other generation. But you can see there, look. There's Staythorpe C, 1,700 megawatt. Couple of local farms around it, but you can see these numbers there, ZDF, ZDA, they're the circuits going out on the purple ones, and then there's some others, but they're all named up. But it's a great map. Go and look at it yourself. It's really good. There's a cheeky little link, look, 4ZV. That's just an interlink that does nothing but link High Marham substation with Brick Lane battery. Didn't know that was there. So that's literally an interconnect to that. Can I click on it? Oh yeah, there you go. 2 circuits, 275 volt interconnector. What about ZDF? Yeah, ZDF, 400 kV, circuit, so it's all there. Go and check it out. It's a really good resource. Anyhow, Spain, yeah, what basically happened is is all these different suppliers come to this substation, and then every decent circuit has a supply. You've got to have a supply, yeah? Then you've got a protection, then you've got to have control, then you've got to have a load. So an overload is all the customers at the other end, whether they're commercial, industrial, domestic or whatever. And when those suppliers come down them pylons, in some of those buildings behind me, that's where the protection lives and the control. So what is the protecting control on this? Apart from all the overload and short circuit protection that there'll be, which I'm not going to go into, and all that gubbins, and all the control for the double buzz bars and all that kind of stuff, which I don't really know much about, there'll be frequency protection. And what we're saying is, from all these different sources that come in, if one of them starts to drop in its frequency, like a bad bit of engineering because something bad's happening on that line, the simplest thing to do to prevent that frequency dropping is to sever it from the network. So I'm guessing from here in switch rooms like this all over the switch yards like this all over the country, they'll be able to sever parts of the network where the frequency is rapidly dropping. There was a massive frequency event a few years ago where a load of trains got stuck and stuff, and that was where, was it like the south part of the country, a big area got blacked out, and that was basically in response to the frequency dropping because the power station fell offline. They cut that area off and severed it to protect it. So now seems like a good time to interject. Some people thinking, oh, this would happen on the national grid. Well, it did happen on the national grid. You probably can't remember. It's over 5 years ago on the 12th of August 2019. If you go onto Kathleen Proctor's website, What Logic, there's an excellent blog post about it which details how and why and the series of events that happened. And you can also download from NISO the official report on that frequency event because it's publicly available information. Much like in Spain, which I haven't actually said in this video because I forgot, what will have happened to kick off this frequency event is some generation will have tripped. All generation, whether it's a massive power station, is still connected by some kind of breaker over current protected device. And if that power station doesn't do something right, something goes wrong, blah, 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 someone sits in a button, it'll trip that power station. Then suddenly, in an instant, you could have lost hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of kilowatts of the system. That trip then can just get swallowed up by the generation, or it could cause other power stations to trip in the cascade effect. The cascade is the killer. So then, in Spain, I suspect a solar farm has tripped. On a solar farm, a panel could have caught fire. A single panel could have tripped out, could have caught fire, tripped out a single substation, of which there may be many on that solar farm, which has then caused the entire solar farm to trip, which then trips other solar farms next to it. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not just solar farms. A power station, gas, coal, nuclear, can trip for any reason, and that reason could be somebody sitting on a button that stops it. So don't get me wrong, it's not just about renewables, but there is some talk that at this point in time, the Spanish news in this article were experimenting with just running on solar. The problem with solar is it doesn't give you kinetic spinning things. That's a whole separate video, but basically kinetic spinning is the kinetic energy on the grid is the spinning alternators. You don't get that with solar, and you don't get it with wind a lot of the time because the wind turbine is not a directly connected AC turbine. It's spinning some sort of DC alternator. Anyway, tangents frenzy. All we need to know is this has happened. Go and check out What Logic. It's here. It's an excellent resource. I'd highly recommend it for facts, not news, on the grid. And back to me on location. Back to the location. The easiest way to explain frequency response is this. Fucking cars, mate. I don't want to delude you, but this fucking road's normally dead. And I've literally had, look, it's normally dead. There's fucking about 5,000 cars going past, and there's literally people walking up and down, fucking doing work and feeding the dogs. Fucking bollocks, man. No. See? And it's just getting windier and windier, which I haven't got any equipment for. I've just brought up my fucking phone. Anyway, I'll continue. Fucking boiling. So I don't do stuff on location. It's a pain in the I just record like this for some reason. I love punishing myself. Car, fuck off. You're going to need... There's a fucking train coming past now, man. Anyhow, apart from... Oh, there's a fucking car coming now. You can't... Just, I'm moving location, but just going to pull into this lay-by and just have a look at this, because it doesn't do it justice, this camera, but look at this fucking madness. That's a big pylon, not the biggest either that you get. But then over there, there's a switch yard. And then over there, look, there's like some... I think that's a transformer. And I think the thing next to it is is that a transformer reactor? There's that guy, the Electric Brit on YouTube, he'll know more than me. What's that? Is that a blast wall over there? Or is that a building, a protection building over there, look, as well? Anyway, this has all got electric fence around it, but you can see how close it is. Like, I'm just stood here. I could have a rocket launcher. That's how fragile infrastructure is. If I was really trying to do some damage, I could literally just start throwing things over the fence here. Coming out of location's a nice idea, yeah? But obviously, to get a shot of me taking up the fray with my head, and to get a shot of those chimneys over there that look really close to me, that I need a certain lens, and I ain't got that lens. Also, I'd have to put the camera here, and I'd be somewhere like over here, and then I'd get that shot. But obviously, that's a complete fuckery, isn't it? Because I'm using the microphone on my phone. Anyway, what we're going to do now is, to solve these problems, we're going to go back to the studio. Right, I'm back in the office this time because on location is a twat. If you watch on Instagram, not YouTube, watch on YouTube, dickhead. And also, this will be backwards, but remember to self, memo to me, flip this image in Adobe. Right, let's just explain frequency. I've already told you that if there's not enough supply to meet demand, the frequency will drop. This one's a bit old school, but I'll explain it because it sells the whole thing of the frequency going down, 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 and just crashing into the ground as like a irreversible cycle that happens if you don't cut off problems. So, old school I know because there's no coal-fired power station anymore, but we got a coal burner. Yeah, and in the burner at the power station, you would burn the coal and it would make the steam. The steam would drive the turbine that then makes the electricity. The heat that we are creating produces steam, produces electricity. Without the heat, there's no steam, there's no electricity. So as long as you've got the heat in there, you're fine, you'll produce electricity. And remember, that electricity you're producing at that end is going all the way back around here and powering these two items here, which I'll tell you about now. This is the vicious circle of frequency, yeah? These fan motors, their speed is controlled by frequency. When it's 50 hertz, these fan motors will spin at about 3,000 RPM. When the frequency goes down, the speed goes down because AC motors are controlled by frequency. So, we've got one motor here putting the coal in, which is the fuel for the heat. And then we've got another motor here, which is providing the combustion air to help the burn. You've got the fuel, you've got the oxygen, you've got the heat. If, for some reason, the frequency drops, the frequency to these two motors drops. And we're talking minuscule amounts at first because frequency goes down a little bit, down a little bit, down a little bit, and just drops off a cliff. So, the frequency starts to go down. What happens in this particular case here that we've got on the board? Well, I'll tell you because that's the whole point of this video. That fan motor slows down a little bit. That fuel motor slows down a little bit. What's then going to happen is there's going to be less fuel and less air, so the heat is going to reduce a little bit and the amount of steam produced is going to reduce just a little bit. But then, because they've reduced, because the steam and the heat are reduced and the turbine's now going to go slower because there's not steam pressure, the frequency is going to drop a little bit more. So that fan's going to slow down a little bit more. And that blower fan's going to slow down a little bit more. And then there's going to be less heat. And there's going to be less electricity. And there's going to be more demand. And then that's going to slow down a little bit more. And a bit more. And a bit more. And it gets into a vicious circle eventually. These are running on 25 hertz, which is half their speed. There's no fire. There's no steam. The alternate stops. And the whole thing comes crashing to the ground. Because once you pop on frequency dropping, you just can't stop. It's like Pringles. The thing to remember is frequency is not just important to motors. It's important to anything. Go and buy some electronic device from America or Japan and plug it in the UK on the wrong frequency. And I guarantee, well not guarantee because it's getting a bit clever that now, but if it needed 50 hertz, it would probably catch fire or burn. So what happens with this frequency is, it is solid for a long time. Absolutely flat line, which that's not, but you know what I mean. Then it can start to dip. And it dips and dips and dips and dips and dips. And before you know it, it just crashes out. If that happens to your frequency, you're in a blackout, you're in a national grid blackout, and you are in trouble. What happens is very, very delicate measuring devices, as soon as this starts to dip, can either increase the supply to make it go back up and keep the frequency hovering around. If you go to one of the websites called GridWatch or the National Grid data thing, I can't remember what it is, I'll put it here. Right then, what you do is go to Google. What have I been looking at? You can see what I've been looking at there this morning. Grid Watch. Click on that. There's GB National Grid Status. There's one called Grid Watch. That's that one. That's good for gathering some types of data, but not others. It's not my preferred one. There's the official National Grid Live one, which has lots of numbers, but is a bit... The graphs I find are a bit shitty. Is there a frequency one? It's got emissions because people love that. The price per megawatt hour, which at the minute is about 120 quid, dropping to 80. The generation, the transfers, the demand. don't do much about frequency on there, do they? So I don't want that. I like this one, Templar.co.uk. That one, GB National Grid status. This one's good. So you've got the demand there, 31.75 gigawatt at the top left. There, look. You've got the grid frequency. That scale goes from 49.5 to 50.5 with 50 in the middle. If it goes out, if the needles were either way on that, we're having big problems. Yeah, when I looked earlier, it was 50.0015, something like that. Then you've got the actual thing supplying the electricity. Closed circuit gas turbines supplying 24% of load at the minute. Lots of gas being burnt at the minute, 25%. Nuclear's providing 10%, 3.19 gigawatts. Wind is supplying absolutely nothing. Cheers, Ed Miliband, build more wind turbines, eh? Wind is supplying nothing, even though today probably loads of people got air conditioners on like myself. And solar, as you would expect, fair one, is supplying 10 gigawatts, 31% of the demand. It won't be extremely accurate, but it'll be round about there. This is not accurate live data. It's accurate live data, but it's not like absolutely on the money, so beware what is going off. Have I accidentally come to the French site? No end. So yeah, check these sites out. They're really useful. The frequency one, there's a graph down here for the frequency one, and you'll notice that it's got a very, very thin level. Or is the frequency here anymore? Yeah, there's data on there, so yeah, you can look at all that. Go and check it out. Yeah, you can look at that frequency and you will see it hardly moves from like 49.995 or something like that. The frequency is the most tightly controlled part of the grid, because when it starts to go down, see you later. If it starts to go up as well, that's bad too, but most of it goes down and results in that. That is what I think happened in Spain. I think there was a massive amount of over-demand, or a little bit of, well, that's wrong. At some point, there's a small amount of over-demand. So as it started to drop, protected devices should have kicked in to remove load from the grid. And in this case, they did. However, maybe they're all set too close together and they all went off at the same time. Because as the grid starts to drop, as the frequency starts to drop, should I say, we want to take off a little bit of load. Then if it keeps dropping more, we'll take off a little bit more and we'll take those little bites. It seems to me though that maybe a load of settings were wrong or something was not right in the resilience of the grid. And as the frequency dropped a little bit too far, loads of load crashed off, resulting in loads of load being available. I don't know if it was a bit hot yesterday, and my air conditioner wouldn't cool the office down, so I got here late in the afternoon, but the actual term for this is called load shedding. So to protect the frequency, or just protect anything on the grid, you shed your load. You go along and you take predetermined bits of load that you've identified and you drop them off. There is a process for this. Some big users, like, I don't know what it works at now, but I'll just tell you what I understand there is, say a big steelworks, ring them up, turn your fucking furnace off, right, we're off. Other big users of the grid like that will come off because they'll be paid a fee or get a bonus for coming off. After those people that have been arranged to come off, they'll start dropping off things that they feel like it, or sections of the area, with the idea being that hospitals don't go off, but they maybe your street might get its turn to go off, something like that. It's called load shedding, and it's done to protect the grid. Previously I referred to the one down south where the frequency event went off, and I talked about you could download that. That was a prime example of load shedding. A lot of people think that was a fault. The reason those big wide areas went off was to protect the rest of the national grid. They shed enough load so that the generation matched the supply, and then they slowly brought those other people back on to keep everyone happy. So that was an event that was controlled. It might not look like it if you're stuck in a train or tunnel, but that was a controlled load shedding event. So yeah, I think the frequency dipped a little bit more than it should have done, which resulted in loads of protected devices working. Then dropping the frequency right down, which then left loads of spare capacity, which then just smashed the old fucking gaff up. It's a bit like you going to your fuse board and switching every single switch off at the same time and then slamming them all back on again. So everything just went off and then there's loads of spare capacity. It's a bit different to that, but that's what happens. So that's how the protection works. It needs to start slivering off the things, and I think it all just went, oh, shut his pants and ditched everything. Hence why they saw something like a 25 megawatt loss in demand, because that load was lost because it severed itself to protect what remains of a system. That makes sense, because Spain didn't have a total blackout. It had a big old blackout, but they did not lose all the generation. That would be a blackout, or I think they might call it a brownout, something like that. I can't remember what the terminology is because I don't care, I'm not that technical. But what I'm saying is they've not got to a black start. So Spain's national grid didn't go off in its entirety, and what it looks like to me was it was a response to a drop in frequency because of over demand on the grid and lack of supply. I'll absolutely guarantee this is a frequency event. I don't think it's a terrorist event. You'd know about it. There'd be fires and stuff blown up. I don't think it's a cyber attack. Someone would have said they've done it by now, and it's just not good enough to be a cyber attack, I don't think. They take the whole lot out. Now, that's covered the old frequency demand thing. What I want to talk about now is, I want to talk about blackouts and how they act on people. But first, I want to talk about, I can't remember right in my hand. I want to talk about Black Start and what that means. Right, I appreciate this video is already very long, so I'm going to cover these things in relation to Spain and how they work. But I'm not going to go into massive detail. I'm going to give you some good resources, and I'll probably look at them in the future. First of all, Black Starts. Black Start is an old term that is as old as the grid, I suspect, and that's the concept that from originally in the UK in particular, and probably in other countries as well, little power stations fed areas around them. Another little power station fed areas around it. Another little power station fed areas around it. Around the start of the last century, Jesus, they start to merge those together to provide resilience and backup. And in the end, at one night on some date that I'll try and put on the screen if I remember what it is, the National Grid Control Centre synced all the grid up and made the national grid. And we sort of left it there since because it provides a massive amount of resilience. The concept of a black start is, if there was a failure and the fault cascaded through the entire system and the whole national grid went off, you'd have to start it again. And the concept is that you would start a single generator that's in a container or a small room, and you would use that to start a power station. Then you would energise the grid and use that to start feeding out and providing power to all the other power stations. This is all very dependent on how long the power stations have been off. If the national grid went off for a week and power stations went off for weeks on end, you'd have a big problem because the power station would be cold. For example, at Staythorpe, where I was earlier, that's got 4 cells. Now, you like to think that what they do there, and this is a very mini level, is they'd start a small generator that would power the essential supplies, the computers, the controls and everything, and then they would power up one of those cells. They've got to get lubricating oil into it, they've got to get steam into it, they've got to get heat into it, they've got to do loads and loads of stuff. Then they could power up that cell. Then they could probably use the energy from that cell to power the other 4 cells, then start generating to the entire national grid. Someone like Radcliffe, a big coal-fired power station, they'd have to get coal moving, conveyors moving. So they weren't very good at black starting. Big coal-fired power stations, big ones, weren't very good at black starts because you had to get so much stuff moving. So in the UK, and if you Google it, you'll come up with a list, I think, still now, it might be a secret, you'll find certain power stations have the capability of black start. But someone like Staythorpe that's got 4 cells, maybe only one of those cells is capable of black starting, because that one cell could get enough grid to start the other 3, and vice versa. It's never been tried, and it hasn't been tried in Spain, because in Spain, the whole national grid didn't go off. A large proportion of it went off, some of it stayed on, so that bit that stayed on would have been used to start the bits that went off. You always run the risk, though, that the bits that have stayed on, you then trip them, trying to bring the bits that have tripped off online. It's massively complicated. I was actually, annoyingly, doing a separate video on it, which is in the background. I'm still doing the research on it from documentation about the British national grid, and I was going to do a whole video on it. And if I leave it here, I can still do a whole video on it. But there's some excellent resources about it online that you can look at and find out more about it. Blackouts. Now, blackouts are when the power goes off. That could be on your street, on your town, on your village, the whole country. When you have a blackout, it's a real weird phenomenon as it affects people, because we do not realise how we are needing electricity. We've seen a little bit of it in Spain, but I think it was only in the first stage of it. First of all, there's an excellent TV programme made by Channel 4 in about 2012, I'll stick it here, called Blackout, and it's written by a load of, obviously, screenwriters, but it's took a lot of advice from industry and the police and the army, stuff like that, back at that time, which was over 10 years ago, and they worked out how people would react to the blackout, and they do a really good job of putting it into a documentary drama. What you've got to remember is, for a few couple of days, people feel like they're wild camping. It's exciting, it's interesting, it's new. Remember COVID. So it's like, it's exciting, it's interesting, new, weird things are happening. After 3 or 4 days, people get sick of eating beans out of cans on the gas stove, and they start to run out of gas for the gas stove, they start to run out of water, food, edible things and all the nice stuff. And after about a week, when your fridge is melted, you can't take a shit because your toilet's backed up and there's no sewage things, people start to get pretty angry. So when you're talking about blackouts, the thing that I always think about is, how will people react to that blackout? That's how it is. Go and watch the Channel 4 thing. I'm going to re-watch it and produce a video at some point on how people react to blackouts. But yeah, in a village or a town, you get quite a party atmosphere going off. People are enjoying it. Like I say, it's like camping. But after a couple of weeks of that, with no telephone, no internet, people get mad. And one thing I did see in Spain was people queuing up to buy battery-powered radios. Something I keep in my house. In fact, I've got one in my van. Battery-powered radios, because they'll always generally find a way to transmit on like the BBC. There are BBC stations that are resilient. They've got the resilience to transmit and give out news. Because when your phone don't work and your telly don't work, at the end of the day, you'll go back to the things that always worked. And battery-powered transistor radios is something I keep around my house. I've got a couple of them kicking about. Batteries, torches. Don't use candles to set your house on fire. But yeah, I could do a whole separate video on resilience to power outages from between 1 week to 4 weeks. But think about it. Think how you would cope. That's it. That's all I've got. That's what it's all about. It weren't very specific to Spain because I don't live in Spain, don't have information about it. But what I'm saying is, this is how it's happened. This is how I think it's happened. It was a frequency problem. It could happen anywhere. And the most important thing to take away from this is, are you ready for that to happen? Could you cope if that happened? Anyway, go in the comments, go wild, knock yourselves out. I've took the morning off work, while doing real work, to do this video, to bang it out as quickly as I can while it's still relevant. But that's me done. Hopefully you got something out of it. Hopefully it's useful to you. Hopefully you know a little bit more about the grid and how important it is to us. And hopefully you're going to go and buy yourself some torches and some radios now in case that grid goes off. Because we didn't get to see it go wild in Spain. All we got was 3 or 4 days of people messing around. Any longer than that, and we'd have started to see things get pretty wild. And obviously, you haven't even seen the news yet or the videos yet because people can't send those videos out. Those videos of what was actually happening haven't hit the internet yet because no one could upload them. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. See you next time. Maybe. Or maybe you never watch a video again.